Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CxO Global Forum's special program on International Women's Day. Today we are celebrating, and let me just remind you all that CxO Global Forum is a platform, a knowledge sharing platform for all C levels across the globe. And we take massive pride in our contributions to the knowledge economy. But we also are proud of the fact that a lot of our members are women. And, they say that the future is female. We've witnessed that, whether in terms of, securing millions of dollars in seed funding with one of our members, Mina Salman from Bag Gallery, or, Halima Iqbal from Unan. We have so many strong women who are leading in terms of international markets as well. Today as well, we've got three panelists with us who are leaders in their own right and who are also extremely accomplished women. So let me start introducing today's panel. We've got Shaista Abdullah. She's the head of strategy and communications at Munsalek Digital Private Limited. Then we've got Mahnoor Farishta. She's the co-founder and CEO at Khair. And then we've got Rida Shamim, who's the founder of HR Ways and Waste Tax. So, welcome to the show, ladies. And I just want to remind everyone by bringing attention to the fact that this year, the theme that the United Nations has given forward for the International Women's Day is contributions toward a sustainable future. So, how can we all contribute towards the sustainable future? Why is it important? Why is the SDG number 5 important? Why should there be equality? And let's speak to these ladies then. I'm going to start with Mahnoor Farishta. Mahnoor, thank you for joining us. And my question to you is, what do you think is the essence of being a working woman in Pakistan?
Oh, if you get me started, I'm going to continue speaking about this forever. But honestly, being a working woman in Pakistan is different to being a working woman everywhere else. Now, there is bias everywhere in the world, and we acknowledge that. But our country, I think this is the generation of women that have really taken charge of their lives. And you see between our mothers to now, we've had this wave of empowerment, education, and the women that are growing and developing those skill sets now, they're really changing the landscape of whether it's tech or it's banking or finance or startups. They change the landscape of the companies that are developing. So I feel like being a woman, the essence of being a working woman in Pakistan is there's a lot of challenges, there's lots of barriers, but what I do see the hope, honestly, is this community of people coming together. So for us, like organizations like yours, for example, that put women first, or for example, Khair, we focus on everyone's healthcare, but we realize women's healthcare is completely marginalized. So we have to put that front. And I feel like our generation of women is really furthering the process for all women coming forward. And honestly, for me, the essence of being a woman in Pakistan is somewhat different to when I used to work abroad, for example, there was discrimination. But here we have the issue of bias, but we also have a lot of socio and economic barriers for women to work. And the problem with those is, personally, I think that no matter how much we grow as a community, no matter how much we empower each other, for women to progress in Pakistan as a force, there have to be structural changes. There has to be on a ground level awareness, education, and community engagement so that these small changes in policy, small changes in structures of organizations kind of help us bring this community together. Like I always say, no matter how much you change the women around you, if the men don't change, little work is going to be done. And I feel like that's something that we should really put forward in this message today. And I like the idea of another hashtag that's really trending in this Women's Day is break the bias. And I think that's something we should really be talking about, how we work together to break that bias.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts, Mahnoor. Now, when we speak of biases, one of the things that comes to mind is that in Pakistan, when you talk about women in the workplace, you traditionally imagine them as teachers or doctors, nurses, beauticians, but very rarely as tax consultants and people working in, let's say, like hardcore accounts or operations roles. So we've got Rida here with us, and she's going to share her thoughts on breaking the bias, because I know that she's doing some really impactful work.
थैंक यू सो मच. मैं थोड़ी सी अपनी जर्नी शेयर करूँगी. हमने अपनी जर्नी जो स्टार्ट की थी 2017 से स्टार्ट करी. हमारा जो हमारा वेंचर था वो HR वेस था. HR वेस इज टोटली लाइक HR IT रिक्वायरमेंट बेस्ड कंपनी. और उसके साथ साथ ही हमने टैक्स कंपनी भी अपनी पैरेलली वी स्टार्टेड आवर सेकंड वेंचर वेस टैक्स एज अ टैक्स कंसल्टेंट कंपनी. अमेजिंग थिंग इज दैट के यू आर राइट के टैक्स कंसल्टेंट इतनी यंग एज पे और वुमेन टोटली वुमेन के उस हमारी फर्म में जो है 100% जो है वुमेन स्टाफ है. फाउंडिंग मेंबर भी वुमेन्स हैं, फाउंडर्स भी वुमेन्स हैं, एंड फीमेल्स जितनी भी स्टाफ है वो वुमेन्स हैं. तो ये दिस इज अ ट्रू पिक्चर ऑफ वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट कि हमने एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म अपनी यूथ को दिया है जिनके लिए वर्किंग करना ईजी है. अच्छा, द अमेजिंग थिंग इज दैट के हमारी टाइमिंग्स बहुत सुटेबल है. 9 to 5 हमारी टाइमिंग्स है. सैटरडे संडे हमारा ऑफ है. एंड हमारे ऑफिस में आई एम ऑल्सो द मैरिड वुमेन. जब मेरा फर्स्ट वेंचर स्टार्ट हुआ था तो 2018 में आई गेट मैरिड. ठीक है. और मेरे साथ साथ मेरे फाउंडिंग मेंबर्स भी दे गेट मैरिड और उनके माशाल्लाह बच्चे भी हैं. एंड दे ब्रिंग इट देयर चाइल्ड एज वेल एट आवर ऑफिस. एंड हम बहुत अच्छे से मैनेज कर रहे हैं. एंड वी आर getting many acknowledgement. The startup founders में भी हमें acknowledgement मिला है and we recognize very well.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much. And now we're going to move on to someone that's heading communications and has been operating in this space for some time. So, Shaista, since you build narratives, please help us understand, how do you think, the narrative can be built for breaking these biases?
I think, so Assalamu alaikum everybody. Thank you for having me on the panel. It's great to participate on this special day, Women's Day. For me, any kind of story, any kind of narrative is really based on, is a very personal one, as well as it being a global one where we share with women. For me, that is actually being true to yourself, being authentic. And I think once you establish, your own authenticity, who you are, and what you want to try and achieve, I think that in itself creates a story for change, I feel. And, I've worked in different markets. I've been fortunate enough to have started my career and worked for a long time in South Africa. And as a consultant there with Deloitte, I had also had the exposure of working in different regions, So I had gone to Australia, I had gone to, worked in Turkey, I worked in Dubai. So, and as a management consultant, somebody who travels all the time, again, there is a stigma attached to women being consultants and traveling, because typically how do you actually do that? You're on the move in a suitcase all the time, because you've got to go where the job and where the client is. But what is the impact of that, considering that you're a woman and you may be married and you may have kids, and there's a care process involved there. So people typically tend to believe or have a bias that you can do it in the few years of your early part of your career, being somebody who's got a job like that. But after that, you need something more settled, because you need to be able to be in one place to be able to take care of your other responsibilities as a female. So I think so it's a matter of choice, and I personally took it on and enjoyed the experience as well. And for me, the change happened not because the personal belief was there, or personal life journey took me that side. It was just just being tired of that kind of life and wanting to build some kind of depth in the industry that I chose, which was finally telecommunications and the fintech space where I'm working now. So I think being articulate about what you need is something that, and being outspoken enough to ask for it, automatically builds, it leads to building a narrative that actually, then goes against mindsets. It will break some mindsets. So people view you in a particular way, and now they view you in a different way. And things like questions like, and I worked abroad, so I know questions like, are you married? Do you have children? Do you intend to have children? Those kind of questions are actually considered sort of an absolute no-no when you're actually in job interviews abroad. But here I find that it's such a standard question, especially when HR is led by females. They're very keen to probe, and they feel that it's comfortable enough to probe and answer those questions. But honestly, that's an individual right, and I think it's if you don't want to share that in a professional working environment, it's your right to not share it, because you're actually ultimately there to do a piece of job, and your competence and your skills should drive it, not where you are in your life journey. So I think from a narrative point of view, I'm a strong believer that you be your authentic self, and you drive the narrative, and I think people then work with you and build accordingly, and understand that that's how we should take things forward.
Right, absolutely. And you made some very pertinent points. And I can't help imagine the fact that in Pakistan, when employers are hiring, they usually go for males because they just feel like, if there's a boy, he probably has his own bike or car. Even for an entry level job, he will not be expected to take care of the home or make food or take care of kids. So he'll be a much better ROI. And then, even in terms of, sending them for fieldwork. And this is something that a bias that does need to break, it needs to be addressed. A lot of times, I've also seen that in workplaces, they often feel like some roles women are just not fit for, right? So, for example, something where there's a lot of logical thinking, a lot of analytical skills. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but usually when we talk about the corporate sector as well, you'll probably see head of communications, head of marketing, and chief marketing officer. But it's very rare that you see CIOs, or let's say like CFOs being females. And I think that's something that does need to be encouraged. We at CxO do have quite a few women in tech as well. So definitely something to look forward to. Moving on, Manur, now in Pakistan in particular, unfortunately, even celebrating Women's Day seems more like a privilege available for the elite few. So, like if you were to go up to, some women in the rural areas or even crafts women, they would probably not even know the first thing about it. So, what needs to be done to make these women financially inclusive?
So I completely agree with you. One thing I always say is that it's very easy for me to be a feminist. It's very easy for me to turn around and say, okay, I am like, yeah, there's discrimination. We can't deny that. Being young, female, and not married is a whole ball of people coming, you asking a lot of questions. Like, even when you look at investors from my perspective, I've been told that, okay, they think if you're a lone woman, 29 years old, they expect you in a couple of years to get married and have kids. So it's a lot of risk. And that's some elements that you think about and you say, okay, fine, but that has nothing to do with my skill set or what I bring to the table. And I really like what Shaista said about asking. I think one of my first mentors had told me, if you don't ask, you don't get. And that's something that a lot of women don't do. We don't have a lot of us aren't brought up with the confidence or the experience to be able to ask for what we believe in, what we want, and what we think we deserve. And that's something I think that really has to change. When it comes to financial inclusion, when it comes to privilege, I mean, you're 100% right. Or at March, talking about Women's Day, posting about it, that is a privilege. And for me, I think it's very yeah, I can turn around and say, okay, fine, my privilege and my ability to speak and maybe my position to start a business and work with men around me, maybe I get that respect that a lot of these women I work with don't, right? I am in that position that maybe I have that privilege. And I don't know if I give a background, but we are a health tech organization and we are working towards building our tech capacity, an integrated platform, but we also really focus on awareness. So me and my teams go to rural populations, semi-urban, peri-urban populations, and we talk about healthcare. And we also talk about financial inclusion. And when we speak to these factory workers, for example, they tell us basic things like हम घर जाते हैं, हमारी जो सैलरी मिलती है कैश हमारा बाप या हमारा मियाँ ले लेता है हमसे और हमारे पास कुछ नहीं रहता. And their stories are actually what motivates me every day. And when I say feminism in Pakistan is ground up. These women who are working, whether it's your factory, a lot of them are sole earners. Like their husbands or their brothers or their sons don't work. They work Monday to Saturday every day. They don't have access to healthcare, finance, and no one really cares about them. So what really motivates us is when we go and even speak to them, if we listen to their stories, they just need someone to talk to. They just need someone to, just understand that, okay, we're here, we're listening. And when it comes to financial inclusion, empowerment, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the fintech space, no doubt. Um, there's a lot of stuff that Pakistan is evolving as a country. Digitalization is huge. So that automatically has empowered a lot of people who are completely marginalized from awareness at the start. But when it comes to financial inclusion itself, there's a lot more we can do. There's some phenomenal organizations that are working towards women empowerment. But for me, honestly, I bring it all down to awareness. So, for example, an interesting project we did a couple of years ago is we focused on these factory workers that got their salary from cash that was really easily taken away with them from force. We started providing them with digital bank accounts. And that just changed, like that intervention would change their life forever because now they have access to banking, and that money that they have, they can save a bit of it. They came back to us and said, अभी हमारे father को पता नहीं है कि हम कितने पैसे बना रहे हैं. अगर raise हुई तो जो पैसे हमें आ रहे हैं वो हमारे हैं, हम इससे थोड़ा कमेटी में डाल देंगे, हम कुछ खरीद लेंगे. That brings them empowerment. So I feel like that honestly, we are very young in the fintech space. We are very young in the tech space, but we are moving towards that direction. And rural areas, it's a hard sell. I mean, I work with rural communities myself, and the barriers we have to even addressing their issues we're very far removed from them. But I do hope and I do believe that starting with peri-urban populations, for example, starting with your household workers, starting with your factory workers in cities, seeing their empowerment and their change will eventually bring us to go towards rural areas. I mean, these women that we speak to, they don't have, I mean, it's really sad, but they are only important, their healthcare is only important when they have a child. And that's something. So now the amount of cases we see about postpartum issues and how for years on end they will not even visit a doctor because they are not a priority. So for us, one of our biggest interventions we had was that, okay, let's talk about digitalization. And even when it comes to telemedicine, these women previously used to wait for their husbands to come home from work to then take them to a hospital, to take them to a doctor. There's so much shame associated with even talking about your problems. So this giving them access through phones or giving them access through just listening to them, I feel like that brings that empowerment and change. And of course, it's even, I mean, we do very little. There's a lot we have to do. But the journey is progressing. And I mean, we're all hopeful. A day like this, I feel like shouldn't just be a token Women's Day. Let's big FMCGs talking about PR packages. I'm really not for that. I feel like when we talk about it, it can't be just for a day. There has to be proper change that has to be done in the process.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Shaista, I heard PR packages and big FMCGs. Do you have a differing opinion?
Again, I'd say, it's Women's Day. Today, somebody was asking me that, why Women's Day? I mean, males, there should be a Males Day as well. And I had a bit of a laugh around it, and it was said in a joking way. But I think, I think it's a recognition just of the age-old sort of biases that have carried, across the time zones and centuries. That women were marginalized. Even though they're 50% of the sort of contribution of the world's population, they still, when you look at different, their contribution, the recognition of their contribution, or even an understanding of them as an individual and with specific rights, I think that hasn't been, catered for and addressed. So I don't know. I personally believe every day is Women's Day. It should be, and it goes far beyond. Having a celebration or a recognition, because I mean, Women's Day is recognized every time a woman speaks against injustice or raises a hand against any kind of personal issue that is, that she shouldn't be held accountable for, or some suffering that she's going to go through. We need to teach, our female population and across every segment of society, that you should be raising your voice, and the more you encourage that, the more and more it becomes, Women's Day for me. So I believe, Women's Day is every day, and we all need to work together to make sure that that's happening, around us.
Right. Thank you. Rida, so back to financial inclusion, right? A lot of women, I know, they don't enter the workspace. A lot of male counterparts are also afraid of the fact that women don't know how to manage money, they don't know how to file taxes, and they're probably not as well aware. As a result, they have to go hand over, their salaries or whatever earnings they have, investments in the hands of their male family members. And that's something that we do see happening even right now in the urban centers, where a lot of the young girls that are working, they have their father's or their brother's bank account where their salary gets credited. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, you're right. Many women do not have awareness to maintain their accounts own. Even हमारे अपनी कंपनी में भी आई सी मैनी गर्ल्स देंगे अपने फादर्स का उनके पास जो है बैंक अकाउंट्स होता है एंड देन वी से डैम के भाई बाय लॉ भी दिस इज नॉट राइट कि वी आर ट्रांसफरिंग योर सैलरी टू योर ब्रदर एंड फादर अकाउंट्स एंड वी फोर्स डैम तो प्लीज ओपन इट. तो सम गर्ल्स हैव फियर दैट कि अगर हम ओपन कर लेंगे मतलब हर वुमेन का अपना कुछ ना कुछ स्ट्रगल एंड फियर फैक्टर है. So some women, some girls saying that if we are open our bank accounts, so if we get married, our in-laws knows कि हमारा bank account है, and इस तरह की foolish things. So I say, then you are graduate from the very non-university and thought like this. मतलब this is not the thing. आप अपना account खुद manage करें and you doing this and same like that. जब हम tax filings भी करते हैं तो हम ये देख रहे होते हैं कि जो वुमेन्स हैं वो अपने ज़्यादातर पैसे या तो जॉइंट अकाउंट्स में रख रही होती हैं अपने हस्बैंड्स के साथ और उनके साथ ही जो है वो इन्वेस्टमेंट्स कर रही होती हैं या हस्बैंड जो है अपनी वाइफ को यूज़ कर रहे होते हैं उनके नाम पे कुछ चीज़ें डाल के एंड यूजिंग द थिंग लाइक दैट. पर यू आर रियली पॉइंट आपने बहुत अच्छा है कि वुमेन्स को अपने इस राइट के बारे में नहीं पता कि उनको अपना वेल्थ जो है खुद मैनेज करना चाहिए, अपनी चीज़ें खुद मैनेज करनी चाहिए.
Right, absolutely. You've made a very valid point indeed. And I'm so glad that you and other women like yourself are so dedicated to the cause of creating that awareness. Moving on. Now, what are some of the cultural taboos that you have come across that you feel like are a barrier to the progress of women joining the workforce in Pakistan? We've heard the obvious ones in the rural centers that women should stay within chadar and char diwali, etc. But what are some of those subtle nuances that happen in the corporate sector as we know it in the urban centers here? Manur.
So, I mean, there's a lot. When we look at healthcare, for example, we have a supply and a demand problem. So what happens in the supply problem, which I just don't understand, is that a lot of really educated girls, really smart. So what's been happening is we have really smart girls throughout school. They do academically very well. They all apply to med school. They all get into med school. They take majority of the seats in med school. They all do very well. And then very sadly, a lot of them, thousands and thousands of them, don't practice medicine. I mean, you and I definitely know doctors within our social circles that are doctors, but they don't actually practice medicine. They're sitting at home working. And they're not working. They're stay-at-home moms. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is, it's a brain drain. We have a whole problem in our society when then, because this supply is limited. On the demand side, we have thousands of patients that don't receive adequate healthcare. Receive adequate healthcare is because they don't have access to a female doctor. So I mean, talking about healthcare itself, to me, it's a real problem. And a lot of these women, when you speak to them, like Rida said, they went to good universities, they went to good colleges, they're educated. And then they'll turn around and tell you, my mother-in-law won't let me practice medicine. And to someone like me, that just blows my mind. Like I just don't understand it. But there's so many cultural and social issues that we have embedded in society that, like Shaista said, mentality is what has to change. It's very important. And awareness. Like, for example, Rida, you said something great about how, even I didn't realize this, but for tax reasons, you can't transfer money into someone else's account. So now if you go and tell a woman that very, very nicely, you give her the awareness that I have to legally transfer money into your account. This is having your own account will help you in the future. Even small tidbits of information like that goes a long way. So when we talk about the healthcare sector, we have a serious problem. And I'm not gonna just blame the doctors at this point, because a lot of these girls want to go to med school. A lot of them want to pursue their education. All of them want to pursue a career, and their family or social barriers won't let them. Now, what is hopeful, I think, is that a lot of transportation mechanisms have come into play that have made logistics easier for women. So before we had the Kareem or the Baikia phenomenon, it was very difficult for women to enter the workforce. It has become easier, but I think more than anything, what's a real problem within the Pakistani healthcare system, at least where I can speak for, is that it's not conducive to a lot of working women. So Rita, you know how you said mothers come in, they bring their children to work. I mean, what is the problem with that? Why is there a problem if you're planning to get married and have kids? I mean, we all realize the international wage gap is actually not between men and women. It's a great Vox video about this. It's not really between men and women. It's between men and women who choose to have children that are discriminated against. And that's where the wage gap internationally goes up and up. But what's interesting to me is that it's not just the women at fault. The cultural social barriers are there, but there's a lot of structural issues. I mean, hospitals are not conducive for a lot of women to work. They don't get paid that much. They have to work long hours. They can't take transport at night. They work night shifts. Makes it very difficult for them to pursue medicine. Not only medicine, when it comes to finance. I mean, we can't, as in a startup field, we can't work 9 to 5. We work a lot. So what's really changed, we work long hours, we work Sundays sometimes, but what's really changed the game for us is remote work, right? And I think that is really creating hope for our women who can actually provide services online. They can work online, they can continue jobs online from the comfort of their homes. But for me, I think structurally, there's a lot of problems. A lot of my doctors will come to me and said that their supervisors have even asked them, आपका बच्चा शादी कर ली, बच्चे होंगे, क्या plans है आपके? Now some of them even said, अगर हम घर पे call करते हैं ना, कि for example घर पे कॉल करते हैं, बच्चे के बारे में पूछते हैं, या just घर पे कॉल करके पूछ रहे हैं सब ठीक है, खाना बनाने ये वो सुपरवाइजर उनको देखेगा, कहेगा अच्छा, like you care about your house too much, you're not interested in the job. And these are the mindsets and the barriers that shock us every day. But these comments are consistently there. I mean, for me also, the amount of questions I get asked about me not being married or me being married or what my plans are in the future, it has nothing to do with anybody. And I have now, I think very nicely over time, have said, I don't think this concerns what we're talking about right now. So you can actually very nicely refuse to answer caller questions. But yes, another thing I think, Shaista, you mentioned is a lot of these questions come from women. Maybe men have become a little scared about asking questions and, they're going to have backfire. The Me Too movement is very real. But for some reason, a lot of women ask these questions. I mean, my friend of mine made a joke. She came back from Canada after 3 years and she said, no one asked me what I'm doing in life. Everybody said, hi, when are you getting married? And these, it's a social problem that we have, it's a cultural problem, but overall it really stems down to structural changes. I mean, the taboo around having women care about their households while at work should just not be there. We live in a new model developing world. I mean, if a father goes and calls his child and asks him how his day was, it's endearing and it's sweet and oh, how caring is he. But if a woman does the same thing, oh, she's distracted. And that really bothers me, honestly. And I think for us, for example, we've seen it. We have a lot of women now, a lot of doctors who can sit from their homes and just conduct consultations. A lot of these women whose mother-in-laws and husbands didn't let them work are now happily making an income sitting at home, probably as much as what they'd work in their residency in their hospital. And they talk about how it's changed their lives. Because at the end of the day, I always say one thing: khud ka paisa, khud ka paisa. That's it. And that's very important.
Right, absolutely. And you've shed some light onto a very, very pertinent issue. Now, let's talk a little about the men around us. Fortunately, Mr. Kamal Masroor, who's the country director for CxO Global Forum, has been someone who's extremely supportive of women in the workforce. I know I've known him for years now, and he's always someone that is more encouraging women to sort of go out and join the workforce. And, even in terms of, I remember back in the day, I used to ask him and tell him that, no, I can't do this. And, he was always very supportive. And I think that's the kind of, because I know everyone's fathers or brothers and sons or husbands as well, to some extent have that sort of support system. But what we really need is from the men that we work with, our colleagues, or even those sharing our office space. It's so important for us to have those kind of conversations with them, for the HR to sensitize those men around us, because they need to make sure that they encourage more and more women. Another topic that has been of grave concern is the fact that we need to start speaking to the support staff and the lower staff in offices as well. So women need to start feeling safer. But moving on, Shaista, we know that a lot of times, women have this complaint, or rather men have this complaint around them, that the HR or the bosses are actually being lenient, or if she got a promotion, then she probably, just got it because she was a woman, or maybe she's done something that is, questionable. So usually, that's also another narrative that we hear a lot at the workplace. So what's your take on it?
I'm laughing because I just, there's certain things you just have to laugh about, because sometimes it just sounds so ridiculous. But having said that, it happens. It does happen. It does happen. It doesn't only happen here. It happens across the world, right? So they are. So for me, yes, it's true, because it happens, and that's why people tend to believe it. Is it the norm, or is it how usually things work? The answer would be no, because I mean, why is a business in business? It's there to make money, and therefore you need to create organizational structures and get the right people in for the right job. And yes, it's not always the case, because there are biases, and they women and women also. It's not only a narrative out there. Women have done a very good job of exploiting this female capability of theirs as well, especially in particular, and this is, I'm saying it out loud, and I'm saying it out as a woman. But typically in customer facing jobs, or in sales and marketing area, or whatever, and I've seen this globally, so I can very confidently make the statement that yes, you're hired for a particular reason, and you use it to get the organization business. And you can debate that whether it was good or bad, or there's a bias associated with it. But the point of the matter is that, again, I'll come to personally being your authentic self. So if you're in an organization, people are there for different reasons as well. If you're in an organization and you're very simply there to contribute and you need to make a living for yourself and your family, and that's what your role is, whether they are male members doing that for you or not also is irrelevant, but you feel like you need to be part of the workforce because you have something to contribute and that you have a financial need in order to do that. Then obviously for the most part you're going to go in with skills that you have to deliver and to be able to do something for it. So the bias is there, but if the bias is associated or a stigma is associated to women just because they're women, then, and again, in my opinion, the only way to break it is to be who you are and do what you need to do for the most part. And if you do that long enough, and if you're bold enough and vocal enough to counter that bias if it tends to appear in side jokes or in nonsense that appears in office gossip or whatever, you need to call it out. And again, I'm saying that very comfortably with a few years of work under my belt. Somebody who's just joined the workforce, yes, I acknowledge it can be extremely intimidating. I'm recalling my experience as a junior consultant just starting with Deloitte, being in the tech space and being in the vertical where you actually find a lot more men than you do females, and you have these sorts of things going on. But funny enough, I mean, my initiation into the consulting world in another country, in South Africa, my boss was a woman, and I was a junior consultant that had just started. She would make me fetch coffee. And get her laundry, the stuff that you see in movies. And I was like, okay, this is not working for me. And it's not a male member doing it. It's a female, senior manager doing this for me. And I'm here to actually deliver on a project. And she's using me for this purpose. So I just didn't get it. And I kept quiet and I did what I needed to do. But after about 3 months into it, I had enough. And I was like, I'm going to speak up, even if it means that that's the end of my career. And I had a conversation with her, and I was very scared. And I had a conversation with her, and I said, I just want to let you know that this is the skill set that the HR guys use to put me on the project for you. So according to me, I'm supposed to deliver X, Y, and Z. Why in the name of heaven are you using me every day to bring coffee and to bring lunch for the team that is on the ground? So she paused for a minute and she said, I wanted to see how long you would sustain in this environment. You're a new recruit. Yes, you've been hired for skills, but there were two things. One, we were testing your resilience, because that's one of the softer skills that gets tested as a skill set, because you need a lot of resilience to be able to deliver in the consulting space. And number two, how long will it take you to actually, to speak up and to deliver? And third thing, we're also teaching new recruits some level of humbleness, because and team collegiality. That's a learning that's coming out of this. So I learned later that it was all by design, and they were going to slowly through this process. That was just her way of initiating. She was a tough cookie, and we had a label for her. We would call her Cruella. That was her label from 101 Dalmatians, the story, because that's in essence how she would treat every new person who came on board. So it teaches you different things, and you need to speak up. And all I can say is you need to speak up, and things that are not might be comfortable for somebody else, but they may not be for you. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether you're male or you're female. You can both experience similar things in the workplace. It's about claiming the space and reiterating that you're actually there to do a particular job. And if that's not okay, then that workplace is not okay with you. We're always thinking that they're doing us a favor. They're not doing you a favor. They're wanting you also for a particular reason and for your skill set. So it works both ways. And the sooner we get to realize it, the better it is. And believe me, till eternity comes, there'll always be the biases of why women join a particular organization or a particular vertical, and why certain verticals exclude women, and why maybe women are using other ways of getting ahead in their career than their skill set. And that's not necessarily true, because I think there's enough. If you go and study HR use cases and case studies, you will have enough reverse situation as well, where you've got females in executive positions having done. There's been movies made about it, where men are not using the skill set, the delivery skill set. They're using another skill set to get on with life.
Right. Absolutely. And thank you, Shaista, for sharing those valuable insights. Moving on, Rita, now, in the interest of time, unfortunately, I'm going to ask my guests to start wrapping up. But Rita, what are some of your recommendations? How can we encourage women to come forward, build more confidence? How can we create that sort of resilience? How can we enable more women to enter the workplace?
I just advise here that women को अपना mindset बनाने की ज़रूरत है. The mindset play a role like that कि कितनी women हैं. I'm just targeting the merit कितनी women हैं जो कि एक बड़े level तक reach out हुई हैं, क्योंकि उनका mindset ही यही होता है कि शादी के बाद they discontinue, they can't do it. इनके लॉस इनको परमिशन नहीं देंगे, उनके हस्बैंड इनको परमिशन नहीं देंगे. तो ये माइंडसेट आपको पहले अपने आप को स्ट्रॉन्ग करना है. यू हैव टू मेक योरसेल्फ ब्रेव. आपकी लाइफ का विजन आपको पता होना चाहिए. वंस यू नो इट, देन यू नो इट को आपको कैसा लाइफ पार्टनर चाहिए. अगर आपको अपना लाइफ पार्टनर भी पता होना चाहिए जो आपके गोल पे आपको सपोर्ट करे और आपको इंकरेज करे. द थर्ड थिंग इज दैट कि अगर हमारी वुमेन्स इस माइंडसेट के साथ आएंगे, जो उन्होंने एजुकेशन ली है उसको वो आगे अपनी कंटिन्यू करेंगे, दे अचीव द सीईओस लेवल जो आप कहेंगे कि बहुत फ्यू होती हैं. वो इसी वजह से फ्यू होती हैं कि बहुत सारी वुमेन खुद भी वांट रिलैक्स एंड एंजॉय हस्बैंड मनी एंड मैनी थिंग्स. मैंने ये नोटिस किया है कि मेरी अपनी पास, अगर मैंने अपनी टीम से भी डिस्कस किया है कि आप सब मुझे बताएं कि आपके ग्रुप में कितनी ऐसी वुमेन्स हैं जो कि आफ्टर मैरिज दे आर वर्किंग. तो वो बहुत फ्यू होती हैं. आपके फिंगर्स में भी पूरी आ जाए तो मुझे बड़ी मुश्किल है. ठीक है, तो द माइंडसेट मेक कि हमें जो है वो हम वी आर नॉट लेस देन द मैन, वी आर अनदर जेंडर. इफ मैन कैन डू, व्हाई कैन वी कांट डू. अगर इस तरह का माइंडसेट होगा तो हम जरूर जो है वो अपनी राइट्स को रिकॉग्नाइज करा सकेंगे एंड वी प्ले इम्पोर्टेंट रोल, इम्पैक्टफुल रोल एट सोसाइटी. ठीक है, और मैं एक इंटरेस्टिंग में थोड़ा सा रैप अप करूंगी. आपके कुछ क्वेश्चंस आपने ये मैं अपने बारे में बताऊंगी. देखिए, जब मेरी शादी हो रही थी ना 2018 पे, तो मेरी कंपनी न्यूली बॉर्न थी और मैंने अपनी शादी हाइड करी थी. मैंने कोई स्टेटस नहीं लगाया था, मैंने कोई इंस्टा पे, मेरी बहन भी मेरे साथ को फाउंडर है, मैं इसको भी रिस्ट्रिक्ट कहा था, प्लीज डू नॉट टैग मी एनीवेयर. बिकॉज जब एक चीज है जिसको हमने कवर किया कि अगर फाउंडर की शादी हो गई तो कंपनी को बिजनेस कैसे मिलेगा. ठीक है, तो शायद शी इज नॉट मैरिज, लेकिन उसके बाद जब मैंने अपने क्लाइंट्स को बताया तो दे आर शॉक्ड कि यू आर मैरिड, तो आपका तो कोई स्टेटस भी नहीं पता चला, ये सब चीजें. और इवन दो कि मैं अपनी और अपनी बहन की एग्जांपल दूंगी और अपनी पूरी टीम की दूंगी. हम लोग इतने पैशनेट हैं कि मैंने अपनी माइयों के दिन तक जो है वो ओडी पॉलिसीज जो अपने क्लाइंट के लिए डिजाइन की है और वी वर्किंग. तो शादी जो अपनी जगह, हमारा बिजनेस, हमारा जो पैशन है, हमारा जो अपने लिए जो हमने ड्रीम देखा है वो अपनी जगह. और लकली कि मेरे हस्बैंड भी मुझे सपोर्ट करते हैं, हस्बैंड और मेरे फादर भी जो है ना, वो उन्होंने भी मुझे ऐसे ही ग्रोन अप किया, ऐसे ही फ्रीडम दिया. और दूसरी चीज ये कि एक और बात के जब आई वांट टू गेट मैरिड तो मैंने अपनी मम्मी को बता दिया था कि मुझे मेरा इस तरह का हस्बैंड चाहिए जो मुझे सपोर्ट करे. अगर नहीं है तो प्लीज डो नॉट कि आप मेरे पास ऐसे प्रपोजल नहीं आए कि अबाया पहन लो या ये पहन लो घर पे कुकिंग, तो ये मेरे लिए नहीं सूटेबल है. तो ये मैंने अपनी पेरेंट्स को डिमांड किया था. तो इस तरह से अगर आप लोग जो वुमेन्स देख रही हैं वो भी डिमांड करें और अपनी एक स्पेसिफिक ले आए कि वी वांट दिस दिस दिस, तो इंशाल्लाह वी ऑल अचीव इट.
Right. Thank you so much, Rida, for sharing, such keen remarks. And definitely, we're very proud of the kind of work that you are doing and your passion. It definitely comes through. Thank you so much. Uh, Now, moving on, Manur, some of your recommendations to the public and private sector. What needs to be done?
Some of my recommendations, sorry, for the public and private sector or for women? I missed that one.
For the public and private sector in terms of engaging and encouraging more women in the workplace?
So I think, I mean, public sector, there's a lot we can do for sure, starting with just education for women, girls' schools. I mean, the conditions that the schools we go to are in, it's so sad. Basic things like sanitary napkins not being there, period leave, stigma, taboo, all of these things I feel like have to come from an educational perspective. It's very important. And also when it comes to the public sector on whole, there's I don't know, like for me personally, not having as much experience worked in the public sector, but just being around it to that extent. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I just think a lot of structural issues. And secondly, when it comes to education, I think that's the biggest thing the public sector to do. Of course, healthcare is something hand in hand that needs to be there. And when it comes to public sector organizations, then yes, structural policies, awareness. I mean, awareness to men, educating men, how we raise our sons, very important. How we talk them, like you said, sensitize men, and even in organizations, your lower income staff, giving them that awareness and sensitization is very important. From the private sector, there's a lot we can do as well. I think organizations, large FMCGs, I know they all love Women's Day. I know they love celebrating the women that they have on Women's Day. And I know that we are all happy and we all want our achievements recognized. I know that's very important. And everyone loves a great gift and a great recognition. But I really want it to be beyond a publicity stunt. I want these organizations to implement policies where workplaces are more child friendly, or where workplaces are more female friendly. When it comes to maternity leave, for example, even paternity leave, these are all things that are, I can say that out of privilege. I mean, I have 100%, I have two companies and I have 100% female workforce in one. I have 80% female workforce in the other. And I see it. I see how we're supporting each other, how we understand each other, how we realize. And honestly, my personal experience, women work really hard. I know that it's not just me saying this. My brother will say this about his organization, so would my dad. At the end of the day, women work really hard because we have a lot to prove. So I will be at my office till 9:30. I will be here in the morning. I will make sure everything is done, because at the end of the day, if something is not done, it ends up, the repercussions we have is a lot more as women. So it's not just proof. And I know we work really hard to prove ourselves to others, but somewhere along the way, we have to work really hard to prove ourselves to ourselves. And that's very important for me. So I really encourage, like, honestly, when you say, what do you tell, like, I always get the question, female entrepreneurs, what do you tell them? How do you encourage women to take up entrepreneurial work and stuff? I think this is the time to do it. Honestly, the internet has changed the game. We have entrepreneurs sitting at home doing phenomenal things. And honestly, my advice to women is, yeah, like Shaista said, speak up for yourselves. Ask for what you want, be authentic, be yourself. And honestly, remember why you're there to serve a purpose. And if your work is done, like you said, काम सही किया है तो कोई कीड़ा नहीं निकालेगा. At the end of it, that's literally what we strive for. We really
Right.
want, yeah, it's very important. And secondly, when it comes to for men, genuinely, I think there's a lot we can do to change the men around us. Luckily, there's a lot of women, our fathers, our brothers, women, like you said, men we work for. I mean, I've had great experiences. I have a phenomenal co-founder. I have great experience with men who champion women, put them forward. And now I've seen it. I see a lot of men who say, no, you do it. Not only because I'm female, but because it'll suit the job more. Like for my own credentials. And I appreciate that. So, I mean, it's the education awareness important in Pakistan. We need baby steps, but we are getting there, and let's hope for a better future for our
Right,
daughters.
absolutely. And we at CxO Global are always trying to create that sort of knowledge and those meaningful conversations in our contribution to the global knowledge economy. And I'm also going to say this, that at CxO Global Forum, we try and give the men and women an equal playing field in terms of arranging those networking events, in terms of giving the opportunities, in terms of providing that safe space for business and work discussions to happen. So, if you are a woman that's looking forward to networking and wants to come forward and join, please visit the website. It's www.cxoforum.global. Stay tuned for more updates and comments. I would like to extend my gratitude to the panelists for joining today. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. We will pledge that we will keep contributing to the knowledge economy, and we will keep supporting women in leadership and women in contributions to the economy of Pakistan and the globe. We're very proud of all of you, and happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you.